Hello, and welcome to Autology, the weekly podcast that brings you the latest on automotive technology. This week's episode centers around the Detroit Auto Show taking place right now, and you're here with me, Yanina Mills, along with Brian Rhodes, Associate Director for Connected Car and Vehicle Experience, as well as Jay Huang, Senior Analyst for Battery Technology. Hello to you both, and thank you for joining this week's episode of Autology.
Thanks for having me,
Hi,
Anna.
thanks a lot for having me.
So, the Detroit Auto Show is finally back after a little bit of a hiatus. You have both attended many of these shows, I'm sure. Can you tell me what sets this year's event apart from some of the previous shows that we've seen? Because the show wasn't just an eye pleaser, it was really a treat for all senses and for everyone. So, we saw dinosaurs, Ghostbusters, even a rubber ducky. So, what can you tell me?
Yeah, it's a fun show. It's oriented at selling vehicles to the public, and they don't take themselves too seriously. But no, if going back a few years, obviously this show has gone through a lot of transition. This for a period of time was one of the top three most influential automotive shows in the world, and we're just sort of moving a little bit beyond the phase of having these flagstone events that are where you need to launch a new vehicle. Um, it's nothing new. Pre-COVID, this was happening. Certain automakers pulling out or not doing as big of launches there. The conversation we had 3 years ago was the competition with CES for a couple reasons. Just a lot of more vehicle influence at CES as technology starts going into the car, but then also the logistics of the fact that those shows were always like a week or two apart in January. So, Auto Show makes the move to the summer, at least the announcement to the summer. Global pandemic ruins some of those plans. We had Motorbella, so we had an iteration of this show last year in an outdoor environment where kind of got people back. But this one felt like we were back to the auto show. It was in September, right? So that part is still a little bit to get used to, but it was back at Kobo turned TCF turned Huntington in downtown Detroit, kind of familiar location there. But definitely suffered from a lack of presence. And I think there's a couple things there, right? It's physical presence of the brand that shows up and puts their logo on the floor, but also the presence of a new concept or a new, significant release and things that we're used to having press conferences that go from, you know, hour to hour to hour. You're jumping to the next press conference and running with this big group to catch it to, a half day slate of announcements, it felt like here. So it's not a surprise coming out of the show. We kind of knew this was going to be the way it was, but it is the reality of what the Detroit Auto Show was for 2022.
Great. So, what would you say were maybe some of the themes that kind of emerged from the show?
Yeah, so one noticeable trend that happened was the electric vehicle for mass. So Detroit Auto Show showed that electric vehicles are already in the mainstream. So there was several electric vehicle models that were displayed at the show stage, including Ford F-150 Lightning and Lincoln's Model L 100 car, which is a very futuristic looking concept car that Lincoln was showing. But the most noticeable EV automaker in the auto show was General Motors. So there were Chevrolet, Equinox, Blazer, and Silverado electric vehicle models were displayed at the auto show, which proved that General Motors, every electric vehicles for everybody motto, by covering the compact SUV and mid-size SUV and full-size pickup truck segment.
Yeah, just to build on that, completely agree, Jay. And I think what's really eye-opening is seeing all of these different variants of electric vehicles there, not not as the niche in the corner, but as you say, all of the segments that consumers clamor for in ICE, seemingly all of them now getting an electric option. Um, Also price points, price points now talking about starting 30, and it's still a big walk, right? Like we've seen, especially the last few years, a growing walk between the lowest and the highest price point for an individual model. But those starting prices do matter when it translates to what consumers actually care about, which is the monthly price that they're paying for their vehicles. That will definitely translate. Um, I think another theme to throw in is it's a complicated market right now because you've got this huge push towards new electric vehicles. You've got brands that are going, fully in this direction. You've got marketing pushes fully in this direction. But then you've got these ICE models that are still there on the floor that are, you know, are waitlisted for supply chain reasons and are still clamored for today. We did hear a number of announcements on, new trim offerings, higher spec trim, traditionally big margin drivers for automakers for tried and true, gasoline powered vehicles that are really funding a lot of the development for these electric vehicles going forward. So I do feel like it's a bit of a complicated picture walking around the show floor and seeing this transition happening, but not necessarily in a clean way. You've got just sort of all of these different vehicles over time. Now, if you zoom out and you see an auto show floor of the past few years, and then I'm sure if we were to extrapolate that out the next few years, we would see the transition, less ICE vehicles, more electric, more clearly. But right now we're in the middle of that stage. So yeah, I think if there's a couple themes to walk away with, it's EVs for the masses and ICEs that are paying for it.
So what would you say some of the key highlights were in terms of the media announcements and the reveals that were coming from the OEMs and the suppliers?
Yeah, I can kick this one off. A lot of the presence, it was the big three had a big presence here. So, as you'd expect, Ford, General Motors, Stellantis. We also had some showings from Toyota and Subaru, but they had the largest square footage of carpet, let's say, on the show floor. So it does bias a little bit towards them. Ford, for instance, had a pretty significant Mustang launch in the evening. The interior pretty dramatic. So sorry, this is the 2024 S650 Mustang. The interior had a huge update, and it's a little bit surprising to see. Very digital experience, 12.4-inch gauge cluster, a 13.2-inch center stack display, and it's under one piece of glass. That always gives the perspective of even more display real estate than the inches I just read off. And in fact, that's the high trim. The lower trims have those same display panels, but it's not under the same piece of glass, and it does feel a little bit smaller. So it kind of proves that theory. But anyways, going back to it, we're talking about the emotional impact of Mustang, right? This is a vehicle for someone that really cares about that brand, and a digital experience does, it doesn't always play into that same emotional feel. Some of the things they did that I thought were cute is the instrument cluster customization. They worked on the software side to make, at least give you the option to change the design of the gauges to fit late 80s or early 90s style box Mustang cluster, which I thought was kind of cool. They're going digital. They're putting the black rectangle in the vehicle, but they're still giving you that sort of feel and sound and smell of what a Mustang should be. Another one on the Lincoln side of things to kind of merge these together, the refreshed Corsair, which not incredibly noteworthy, I'd say, except for the fact that it did have Active Glide 1.2 on it. So this is Blue Cruise from Ford, but the Lincoln brand of that is Active Glide. The significance there is it adds lane changing. So I think the story here is with something like a Blue Cruise or a Super Cruise or these types of L2 to L2 plus developments, you don't wait for a flagship to have the next big feature launch, right? You don't have that kind of time. You need to keep it kind of as real, live, updated as possible to keep up with the competition. So using a relatively minor facelift like Corsair to talk about the next iteration of Blue Cruise, I think is an interesting strategy. And I think it makes a ton of sense going forward for them. Also had a larger, new facelift means larger screen. It's almost definition there. So a larger 13.2-inch screen, Sync 4, OTA, a few years of Alexa, I believe, were included there. So yeah, I think those were some of the takeaways from Ford and Lincoln. Lincoln did also show a couple of design concepts. They had the L100 and the Star concept. Both of them were shown previously. I believe they were the stars of their respective releases in the past few months, with Star being a little bit closer to a production concept, only in the fact that it is on wheels, and the L100 wasn't. So that's something. But yeah, they're design concepts, right? So they're playing with what a vehicle can do when your hands are off, and the flexibility that this device now can become in the future. So, at least something to get consumers interested in walking into the booth, I'd say.
And there's also Cadillac Lyric and GMC Hummer electric pickup and SUV. They're also shown as a high-end vehicle models in the GM booth, and they're all using the Ultium cell, which is a joint venture between the LG Energy Solution, which is the big supplier for the GM, and GM. So the Ultium cell, the core concept of this is a modular design of the battery pack. So this modular design is really important for GM because unlike Tesla and other electric vehicle makers, they produce a lot of vehicle models. So it's really important to have a flexibility in their battery design. So this modular design makes it easy for them to engineer the energy density and the vehicle kind of kilowatt hour capacity. So Ultium battery packs are just flexible enough to contain multiple combinations of the modules depending on the type of vehicle model. So the battery pack itself can house 6 to 24 modules depending on what the vehicle type that GM wants to build.
Yeah, I'd definitely say that Chevy's booth, their display was probably the star of the show. I'm curious, Jay, if you agree with that or not. But you walk up to it and you've got the row of electric vehicles. Equinox was just announced in an ad campaign. I think first NFL Sunday was their release, and so this is the first time it's kind of there in the flesh in front of the public. And then you had Blazer, a recent announcement. You had Silverado. So you've got some interesting offerings. To the point Jay made about the themes, you're looking at a number of different tried and true Chevy customer bases, and now we have electric offerings there. So seeing them all in one place, very well branded. Ultium is definitely aimed, I think, to be a premium consumer brand. That's the way they're marketing it, at least. It's not industry mumbo jumbo. They're putting this out in the forefront. They think it's something that is worth advertising. And then off, kind of in the corner, you've got GMC still showing the Hummer pickups and an SUV coming soon. So yeah, I think that's definitely something worth talking about. In terms of those three Chevy EVs, all three running Android Automotive with Google Automotive Services. Not something that should surprise you because that started with the Hummer EV and will continue to kind of trickle out. But a number of automakers, a long list of automakers, have announced a partnership with Android on Android Automotive, and some of them have started talking that back a little bit, either delaying implementation or stripping it of the content you would have assumed that was going to be there, or even that they maybe announced was going to be there. But GM is an exception here, just clearly going full force with what the original announcement for an Android tie-up was going to look like. Also on the interiors, again, as I mentioned, new vehicles or new refresh, you get a bigger display. So I think Equinox and Blazer were running a 17.7-inch touchscreen. It's GM does pretty well with investing heavily in the hardware in the cockpit into that user experience, and then rolling it through a number of nameplates until they refresh that cockpit and then roll that through the next series of facelifts and things. I'll also mention one last thing on Chevy is they did unveil the Tahoe RST trim. So this is a performance trim, extra horsepower, faster, things like that. And I think it's a great example. Just Chevy alone is a microcosm of what we're seeing with significant investment in vital electric vehicles for them to be successful, right? All three of those are. But then right next to it, you've got Tahoe RST, which right now is going to command a premium price. People are going to pay for it, and it's going to be a high margin vehicle for General Motors to foot the bill for a lot of development and Ultium and other things like this. And they're not unique here, right? Many are following the same strategy. On Jay, anything you want to mention on Subaru and Toyota?
Oh yeah, for sure. So Subaru and Toyota, they were displaying some vehicles, but mostly on hybrid, not like fully battery electric vehicle. So there was no BZ4X in the showroom. We could not find that. And Subaru depends on Toyota for electrification strategy. So they share some commonality on that. And Toyota, they seem to be still pushing the hybrid electric vehicles rather than battery electric vehicles, at least at the stage. So that's kind of a summary of Subaru and Toyota.
Yeah, and I think we should probably mention Stellantis just again in terms of physical presence there. It was large. Um, we had a number of things, but the real attention grabbers would be the Dodge Charger and Challenger last run editions. So they've announced the end of date production. They're going out with a bang, I think, in terms of how they're marketing. I think they probably rightly know that there is a market for these vehicles, the last of these vehicles in their current form, to come off the production line, and they're going to milk that. There's some conversation about just how difficult it must be for them to be able to forecast the type of demand that's going to exist. It's niche, but also it's a niche that's worked for a very long period of time. So yeah, you've got those. You also had the Jeep Grand Cherokee 30th anniversary edition, which is I guess not really a trim. It's more of an option on Grand Cherokee that it's like a $5,000 design option. Basically, you black out the trim inside, you black out the wheels and things. More of I guess, a celebration of where Grand Cherokee has come. And I think I might have forgot to mention actually now thinking about this, the Bronco trims. We had a pit of Broncos at Ford that kind of show the variants that they're offering there. The Raptor was the one probably attracting the most attention for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's a recent announcement. Number two, there was a person in a Raptor suit walking around the show floor. So that's an approach. But yeah, just showing out the flexibility. For Ford, they're really harping on. They call them hero brands or halo brands. Mustang, it's Mustang we know and love. It's also Mach-E. Bronco, it's all of these variants of Bronco and all of this customization that consumers can pay a high price for. This is definitely something that they're harping on as a focus, even in an ICE world.
It sounds pretty cool. I did learn an interesting tidbit over the last couple days. Jay, and I don't know if you were familiar with this, but I learned that the Hummer EV battery is a whopping almost 3,000 pounds, which is about the weight of a Honda Civic. So that was an interesting bit of trivia that I learned. But so yeah, it seems that the auto show tried to reinvent itself once again. What used to be a show that was, full of powerful, gas-guzzling automobiles has sort of morphed into a show of greener automotive future with lots of EVs. Into what exactly moving forward? What would you say?
Yeah, I don't know that this is an explicit direction. I think it's the direction the industry's moving in. So, these are naturally the vehicles that are going to be on the show floor. They have, the Detroit Auto Show has no choice but to reinvent itself to fit what's going on. It's nothing specific to this show. Generally speaking, these big flagship shows are not probably the best investment to get all the eyeballs on your announcement if you have to compete, by definition with other goings on the show floor. When you can announce on an NFL Sunday or a private media event that is, released digitally to the world, it probably gives you a little bit more space to breathe in the news. And again, you don't have to plan timing around things you can't control, like when are we going to have the Detroit Auto Show? Is it June? Is it July? Is it September? Is it January? There's enough to worry about in the industry. So, I think you're still going to have a big three presence to this always because of local proximity and what that market is. But generally speaking, we saw even this year, the dealers stepped up to put more, just a dealership bringing in the Acura models or whatever onto the show floor to show them off to the people that are going to attend. It's definitely moving more in the direction of dealer oriented show as opposed to flagship announcement oriented show. But yeah, again, as a reflection of the market, this is, and many auto shops will become electric focused, for sure. Maybe not the big mobility focus that was kind of all the rage a few years ago. There's of course some of that, but selling new products and informing customers about charging and home chargers and infrastructure developments and things, the auto show still has some value there, I think.
Agreed. So great. Thank you. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. A big thank you to you both for joining Autology.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, happy to be here.
And thank you to all you listeners for tuning in as well. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode at our autology@spglobal.com email. And you can find out much more at autotechinsight.ihsmarket.com. Don't forget to hit all the subscribe, follow, and like buttons to stay on track with the latest Autology podcasts. And we look forward to you joining us again in the next episode. Bye-bye for now.